Starting. The recording has started.
Yeah, okay.
Mr. Sagar?
Just a moment.
Sure.
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me, Akshay?
Yes, I can hear you. Only thing, there is a bright light on the screen, so we are not able to see you properly.
Okay.
Now it is fine.
Okay, great. So, good evening, everybody. Friends, uh, this particular typical and very different kind of meeting, uh, we we intend to introduce you to one of my friends. All those who are joining this for the first time, I will quickly let you know how this meeting works. First of all, this is one of its kind in probably India, that we start our meeting at 9:30 p.m. and still those who are interested, they do join, discuss, brainstorm. And this is primarily a brainstorming meeting, and this is not a lecture meeting. Secondly, we do have stalwarts, and they voluntarily come, discuss, give guidance. So the primary reason for this meeting, the objective is that these people who are stalwart in their field, they share their knowledge. They don't show off. We have stalwarts like Anil Sathe. Today he has got some problem and therefore he is not able to attend, but otherwise he's a very regular attendee and also our mentor for this group. We have Deepak Tikekar, we have uh, Dr. Kanhere, Ishnu Kanhere, and there are so many others to name who are very good in their practice of appeal. So this group is devoted specially for income tax appeal matters. Uh, so this is how it goes. Like it's not, as I mentioned, the lecture meeting, but at the same time we have to honor the flow of the meeting of the lecturer or the person who is a facilitator or a leader of this group. Therefore, what happens is that after a particular point is made, he may stop for a while and say that up to this whether anybody has to add anything, rather than he will not say whether anybody has to ask anything. Okay, because there are others who are having good knowledge and they can add to the point. So all of us are equal. Maybe some people in this group might have even more knowledge than our facilitator, and they guide us and they add some of the points. So collective knowledge of this group becomes a very ideal kind of a situation, wherein all of us, after adding the knowledge of every one of us, become knowledgeable to that extent. After this meeting is over, we also, in a couple of days by Sunday, we upload this on a YouTube channel, and only those who are interested, they watch that for 1.5 hours and so on and so forth. We don't advertise we have this YouTube channel and this and so on and so forth. Only in this group we share that. So sometimes you may not even find by normal search also. So friends, today we have 24th June, 9:30 p.m. and I'm happy to introduce Akshay. Akshay's other information he himself will give, but I can tell you that he has been specialized in transfer pricing, which itself is code by itself. There are certain areas uh, which are, although part of the Income Tax Act, we can say that they are actually the code of separate. You can always have the separate code for itself. So, for example, sections 11 and 12. These are the trust areas, trust related income tax matter. So altogether different provisions. Similarly, transfer pricing also. And my personal feeling is that unless you have a complete knowledge in transfer pricing, it may not be a good idea to actually give a transfer pricing report, because there are a lot of intricacies. And unless and until you know all the intricacies, you may land up yourself in trouble, because generally the stake in such kind of transactions and the litigation are quite high. So you do require a kind of a specialized person. So general practitioners may not be able to give that kind of a justice. Although sometimes we feel that transfer pricing report is filling up of the form, yes and no, and mentioning of some method, but it's not the case. There are several books written on that, and couple of books are written by Akshay himself. I would request Akshay to give a big brief background of himself before he proceeds, and then he can start with his lecture, because he has so many things at his disposal and to his credit. So I would request Akshay to give that kind of a background himself, rather than me giving that kind of a detail. So Akshay, it's over to you. I don't want to take up your time in much kind of an introduction. And those who are not speaking, those who do not want to comment, I request all of them to mute their microphone. Only when you want to speak, you can unmute your microphone. So even videos you can put on as per your wish, but whenever you want to speak, it may be a good idea that you can actually put on your videos also, so that others can see who is talking. Okay? So that's all for the tonight, and I would request Akshay to share his knowledge for tonight. Akshay, it's over to you.
Sure. Thank you, Sagar sir. It's an honor to be here. And I don't want to give a very long introduction of myself. I'm a chartered accountant, a fellow chartered accountant, a practitioner, and my focus area is transfer pricing. I like writing, so I have written few books. I specialize in this area, and the practice is also very specialized, focused one. So that's all about me. I also like to teach, so that's something is my passion, and that's something that I do on a regular basis at various forums. Now, having said so, let's come to the topic of today, uh, which is on transfer pricing. But while me and Mr. Sagar has been discussing on transfer pricing, the entire group is mainly for appeals. Okay. However, as Mr. Sagar said, transfer pricing is a code in itself, and going straight away to the appeals would mean directly doing graduation when we are in standard one. So that's why I thought that we will break up the sessions into two or multiple parts, where we start with basics of TP. Slowly we graduate onto appeals, uh, because I think over the years, transfer pricing has assumed a lot of significance in the Indian jurisprudence, and there are cases which are now out in the public domain which are followed globally. In fact, uh, bigger economies like Saudi Arabia, I mean, not bigger than us, but surely one of the growing and developed economies like Qatar, they are coming up with transfer pricing rules and litigation standards which are mirroring the Indian standards and practices. So that's really a sense of pride for us that uh, from a global point of view, we have been able to leave a mark as far as TP is concerned, and I will explain you how and what type of mark we have left. Moving ahead, what to expect today? Today, we are not going to speak a lot about appeals, but we are going to speak about issues. We are going to speak about basic compliance and certain aspects in compliance which we as started accountants should keep in mind. I would like to keep it short because many of us would be doing this compliance, but I will cover it up in terms of certain key areas and certain plus and minuses that we are supposed to do and certain mistakes to avoid. Okay, I'll try to keep it brief. The presentation is long because it also includes the BEPS action plan, which is again a part of compliance, but I'll try to cover it almost around in 1.5 hours for sure, right? By the way, today is a test for me because whenever I generally speak on transfer pricing. I always keep telling at forums that I can speak on TP right from 10 minutes to 10 hours. And even if I'm in sleep, I sometimes speak about TP. So at 9:30 p.m., this is really a test for me and a proof that even when I'm sleepy, I can surely talk about TP and make some amount of sense. But that is something that you need to judge, that whether I'm making any sense or not. Uh, I would appreciate any type of questions at any point of time. Hold me there, ask me questions. If there are no questions, please add any type of inputs at that point of time, because frankly, I am also a student of this mammoth topic. It's impossible to completely know about transfer pricing in one life, I guess. So any points to add, feel free to stop me, unmute yourself, and speak about it. So I would like to run it like a discussion, otherwise I will definitely put you all of you to sleep. Great. uh, so in terms of our topics to cover, we are going to look at a little bit of transfer pricing overview at a macro level in India. We are going to talk about transfer pricing audits, a little bit about documentation today. We are going to talk about, most importantly, the global BEPS plan and the three outcomes out of that, which is the master file, the local file, as well as the CPCR. I think there is some background noise. Mr. Puneet Jindal, if you can just mute yourself. I'm not too sure if it is from your side. Thank you. Okay. Sitting in 2021, I think we are almost now past the teenage stage of transfer pricing, and we are full adult. The TP law in India was uh, established and introduced in 2001. And over the past 20 years, India has emerged as one of the very strong economies which has uh, a lot of opinions on TP, a lot of views on TP at the global forum. It's well respected at global forum. The views that the transfer pricing office takes, these are very innovative views. Okay, one might feel that they are aggressive. Yes, they are aggressive. But India has been a country which has. I request everybody to please mute their mics, please. Yeah. And yeah, where was I? Yeah, so it has a very strong voice in the global forum, and issues like, I would say, marketing intangibles, corporate guarantees, the share transfer issues, the management service issues, the IP issues. These are very relevant ones. And even from a judicial perspective, the issues have developed over a period of time. I mean, there was a time in 2005, 2006, where we were arguing whether expense transactions are indeed going to be international transactions, because the law started with any income arising out of international transaction would be subject to Section 92. That's how the law is framed. So the initial issues and litigation was around whether only income will be covered or whether even expenditure is covered. So we have come a very long way from there to complicated topics like IPs, which I think, and while I have been talking to the TP officers, assume a very important share in various interpretations. I think the share of IPs and intellectual properties is around 70 to 80%. And if the transfer pricing office focuses on this itself, they will be able to understand any type of TP structuring and restructuring that is happening in and around the IP structure. So that occupies a very big and substantial space. And if you look at various developed economies like the US, their focus is mainly on intellectual properties when we talk about transfer pricing, and that is something that we should also be looking at when we are doing any type of transfer pricing uh, you can say representations, transfer pricing documentation, transfer pricing submissions, because IPs is something that carries value, but we'll cover more in detail in the subsequent slides. 2006 to 2013 was a period basically when the litigation in India grew. And these were the times where all the positions of the taxpayer were challenged. You do a transfer pricing documentation if your transaction earlier, if above 5 crores, and later on they changed that circular to 15 crores, a reference was made to the transfer pricing officer. And with such a reference, uh, almost there was a 50-50% chance that once the file is referred to the transfer pricing officer, the assessee or the taxpayer will definitely get a tax adjustment or a TP adjustment in that particular file. So this was the period with high tax on TP aggression, which was seen. I will show you the chart how the TP litigation went up. It's my favorite chart. And 2012 was the year uh, when the Vodafone case was out, and I think almost 154 or 156 amendments were made, many of which were retrospective, and impacted the transfer pricing legislation at that point of time. So that was the turning point of Indian transfer pricing regulations. 2014 till today, the way how I have seen litigation is, the litigation has increased in terms of quality and has gone down in terms of quantity. Very interesting cases are getting resolved these days. When I say litigation, it is both ways. It is proactive litigation as well as it is reactive litigation. Proactive litigation is all about safe harbors and advanced pricing agreements, where you don't want to get into litigation, but you go to the transfer pricing authorities with certain requests so that you kill the litigation in future. And also the reactive litigation where, as I said, the cases like share transfer, management services, IPs have now been picked up. This is coincidentally also the year of global tax anti-avoidance, where G20 countries, their heads came together to fight against the evils of tax avoidance. And they gave an assignment to OECD, which is termed as base erosion and profit shifting at that point of time. And OECD came out with certain rules and regulations in 2016, which where there were certain minimum standards and there were other standards which could be followed by various countries, and some of them were transfer pricing standards. Uh, India has been one of the forerunners in terms of adopting a lot of BEPS action plans, and I think almost all, even the equalization levy to say, the MLIs to say, the transfer pricing aspects, India has tried to adopt as much as possible. So significant economic presence test, okay, principal purpose test. India has been capturing everything that has been suggested by OECD in the BEPS project. So this slide is a classic representation of, just a second. This is a classic representation of how litigation in transfer pricing went up. So the gray boxes is the total transfer pricing adjustment in INR crores, okay, and the orange boxes are the number of cases that were selected. So if you see, my first 2001 2002 assessment happened somewhere in 2005-6. Approximately 239 cases were selected and less than 100 crores of adjustment proposed at that point of time. But let's come to 2013. See how a gradual increase in terms of number of cases went up. Uh, even the adjustment went up, and adjustment went up to the level of 70,000 Indian rupee crores. So 1686, and then slowly and steadily, if you see, the adjustment has come down, the cases have gone up, but now even the cases have reduced. But the quality of assessment and adjustment uh, is much better now. Importantly, because there is something called as uh, uh, computer assessed scrutiny, where a transfer pricing risk, after you file a Form 3CB, a computer understands whether there is a risk in that particular client or not. Okay. Now there are certain parameters which are already built in, and only after that a case could be referred to a transfer pricing officer if transfer pricing is showcased as a risk. And I have generally observed that whenever you have transactions like management services, whenever you have transactions like corporate guarantees, wherever you have transactions in terms of exports above certain level, these do get selected under the computer assess scrutiny for the transfer pricing cases, and especially when there has been an addition in past, that is something that surely gets covered. Now, India uses a very different way of transfer pricing, not in terms of law, but how it is implemented. Most of the countries which are developed nations, they do not have any filings to be undertaken uh, with the income tax authorities at a real-time basis. Like in US, you maintain a documentation on a contemporaneous basis, but nobody comes and checks those documentation. So US companies do maintain transfer pricing documentation once in, say, 3 years, and they roll forward for another 2 years. That's not the case with India. India has a very specific regime of Form 3CEB, or we can call it as transfer pricing audit report or a disclosure report, where a taxpayer is mandated to disclose certain transactions which have been entered into with its associated enterprise or foreign related party, right? Now, this is something that forms a foundation of even risk assessments and analysis, and also is a foundation and a strong pillar for compliance, because it gives transfer pricing a very special place from a compliance point of view. The taxpayer needs to undertake a compliance. Even if it undertakes, say, 10 rupees of a transaction with associated enterprise, he needs to fill the form 3CB. That's not true with tax audit report. Now the value of tax audit report for certain transactions have gone above 10 crores. Only after that a tax audit would be applicable, but that's not the case with form 3CB. You need to file form 3CB for the transactions that you have undertaken, and in such a case, if the foreign company gets income out of the international transaction, even foreign company needs to file the form 3CB in India. So that is something that we call as mirror documentation or mirror audit report, right? So there is enough use of technology, and in 3CB the technology has been used continuously for assessing transfer pricing risk from a TP audit and assessment point of view. And I think 3CEB was a very important factor in the Indian transfer pricing jurisprudence, because this has been responsible, because it's a summary documentation that a transfer pricing authority gets. So it has been responsible for active selection of TP adjustments also. So that's why there is a lot of emphasis and a lot of growth of transfer pricing in India. And I think I would like to uh, allocate a lot of responsibility onto 3CB and the way how the transfer pricing compliance is undertaken in India for the growth in, I think the importance as well as the litigation in this particular area. Any questions, any additions, any views till here?
Akshayji,
May I speak?
can I ask a question, Akshayji?
Haji Pramodji, yes.
Yeah, the last slide which you have shown is regarding the number of TP cases and adjustments made, right?
Yes.
Any further clue available as to what has happened further in this particular litigations as to whether these transfer pricing adjustments have been upheld or any of that sort is available?
So frankly, the government data is available till 2015-16. But personally, if you ask me, I know now lesser number of companies are getting selected. Also, the adjustment, the initial adjustment aggressiveness has gone down. As far as these cases are concerned, if you look at the way how tribunals are placed today, uh, 8 out of 10 case comes in favor of the taxpayer. 2 cases, I mean, when I say favor of the taxpayer, I will also consider remand backs. and 2 out of 10 cases maybe are won by the department. So that's how it is laid in the tribunal at least, and that showcases that out of say 70,000 crores in 2013, I would say around 50,000 crores of cases have already been won by the taxpayers. I'm just going by the statistics, the calculations basically.
Any clue on this, whether the CIT appeal is a better route, or rather we can talk about it later actually at the
No,
time of
absolutely.
meeting.
I can hint it out now also. So
Yeah,
there has always been a tussle between CIT appeals and DRP.
yeah.
Now, whenever we receive the draft assessment order, uh, it's very important at that point of time to undertake a quick feasibility analysis, because whenever you look at CIT appeals, which quickly means that there could be certain tax outflow, uh, because you will not the 20% at least you need to pay upfront, because your draft order will become a final order, and that the demand notice will be issued to you. That's not the case with DRP. If you are quite certain that you might get certain benefits while going to DRP, because it's a bigger panel, there are 3 commissioners, and if you think that you are able to successfully technically argue in front of the commissioners, DRP becomes a better route. So again, I would say it's very factual. It's all about we need to undertake that feasibility analysis to come to that point.
Just to take it further, that from DRP, if
Hmm.
you are going to the tribunal, then in that particular case, still you are supposed to pay 20% only?
Yes, that's correct.
That's right. Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
Akshay,
Yes, Mr. Vinay.
is there any basic limit that up to minimum we are not supposed to file 3C EB?
No, there is no basic limit.
Nothing
It
like that.
zero.
Earlier it
Even
was there.
no, it was never there. It was always zero, and it stands zero even today.
Oh, I see. So any
Yes,
turnover, anything, if it is an international with the associated enterprises, one has to go for a transfer pricing.
one has to go for a transfer pricing, and especially at least file the 3CB. There is a limit
Okay.
for transfer pricing documentation in international transaction of 1 crore,
1 crore. Okay, okay.
where
That is
it
what I
says
was.
that Rule 10D would not apply to companies where the international transaction is only till 1 crore.
Okay.
But it doesn't say that you don't need to maintain documentation. You still need to maintain documentation. And I have done a lot of assessments where the transactions were 70 lakhs, 80 lakhs also.
I
They
see.
still expect you to maintain documentation. May not be in the format of Rule 10D, but
Mhm.
documentation maintenance is very important. And for specified domestic transactions, the documentation limit is 20 crores.
Yeah.
Right,
Hi,
right.
Akshay.
Hi,
Nitin.
Nitin.
Yeah. So, Akshay, as you said during the presentation just 10 minutes ago, that in most of the cases, the transfer pricing, litigation is in the favor of the SSE, I mean, to the taxpayer. However, as per the latest, provisions of the income tax law, the assessing officer cannot go against the DRP order. Right. So in most of the cases, because in I think maybe around 1 year or so, if I'm not wrong, that AO can go against the DRP order. However, as per the current provision, if I'm not wrong, the AO cannot go against the DRP order, and because of these reasons, that AO, the DRP in most of the cases giving the the order in favor of the department. This is my experience so far. Maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong. This is your experience, because
Yeah,
the major reason behind is that the department can go against the DRP order.
so DRP, frankly, they will give you things in favor which are settled. Okay,
Right.
they will not take decisions where things have not traveled up to High Court or Supreme Court, and there is a matter of legal jurisprudence. They will not take any type of, I would say, calls on that. So they are an extension of the tax department. They
Okay.
are the commissioners. Their thought
Right.
process is revenue oriented, right?
Right.
So even if you tell them whether the particular order is appealable by the department or not appealable by the department, the mere mindset of DRP itself is pro revenue. So the fact is, that's where I said that we need to look at whether CIT appeals or DRP, because both are extension of the revenue authorities itself.
Right.
So we need to be prepared for tribunal whenever a transfer pricing case comes in. Twofold reasons. One is because TP adjustments are not, and I have not seen TP adjustment in lakhs. TP
Yeah.
adjustment goes above crores.
Right.
That's point number one. Yeah. And secondly, it's all about the documentation. If you have the documentation and the justification, then at the tribunal level, the justice will prevail. But if there is any type of thoughts on the tax avoidances and any type of fancy structuring that we have done, TP can't help you. TP is not the solution for avoidances. TP is something which is anti-avoidance. So that is very evident when the documentations are scrutinized by the department as well as the tribunals. So I hope I'm able to answer your question, Nitinji.
Yeah. 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 Good answer.
Great. Any other views?
So I have an observation. Maybe just I am going a very bit ahead. What you are saying as of now. So if I may ask that, what are the implication of pillar 1 and pillar 2 on the TP adjustment? Because pillar 2 talks about certain CIT that taxes, minimum tax which needs to be paid as the G7 countries determined for 15%. Maybe that is a corporate tax, not TP. But whether is there any link or how the TP will be going ahead in regard to pillar 1 and pillar 2 approach?
So pillar 1, I will just take it out at this point of time because it's all about digital taxes. And I think it's been fought at various levels with US raising a 301 inquiry on India as well as other developed nations who have digital taxes. And there is an imbalance at this point of time as far as pillar 1 is concerned, until and unless there is a consensus that is arrived at a global level and that is driven by OECD. So TP doesn't play a big role there. But as far as pillar 2 is concerned, although we are talking of corporate tax, transfer pricing is frankly the way how multinationals do business. So even if you have to talk about corporate tax in Italy and corporate tax in UK and corporate tax in India, ultimately it is the profit on which there will be tax that you will impute on. So you will put 15% on certain profits, right?
Right.
So I can be paying 15% on profit, but if my profit itself is not justified, that 15% is not going to be helpful to me. That's why transfer pricing will play a very big role in pillar 2.
Okay.
Right? Because it ultimately talks about value. So taxing where the value is.
Right.
So that's the genesis. So you can arrive at a 15% corporate rate tax at an individual country by country level only by going through transfer pricing regulations. There is no other way out.
Fair enough. Thank you so much.
Shall I move ahead?
Deepak Tikekar here.
Yes,
will there be any contradiction between transfer pricing in direct taxes and indirect taxes? For example, in case of indirect taxes, the customs authority may say you have under invoiced imports, whereas the TP officer in direct taxes will say you have over invoiced import. Is there? How do you reconcile these two views?
So basically, this is again a fight going on since ever. And the governments at various levels are working with transfer pricing and custom convergence. Frankly, me and some of our associates are also working on a research paper on how TP and customs could converge. Their methodologies to converge are same. However, the ideologies to both the laws are very different. But ultimately, both the laws are looking at one common ground, and that is arm's length price. And when I say arm's length price, it's a price which is fair to a buyer and fair to a seller. So ideally, when I say that an arm's length price of a particular, say, product, say it's an apple, is say 100 rupees for a buyer, it is the same for the seller. So it's going to be at fair market value, it's going to be at arm's length price. It's just that the ideologies of customs and TP should sync, not the methodologies. The methodologies are very similar. In fact, most of the custom SVBs are addressed through a proper transfer pricing documentation. So if you are able to prove the arm's length price to them, then I think customs nowadays is very much receptive to transfer pricing policies. But the fact is, many of the taxpayers don't have transfer pricing policies. And that's where they get caught in the circle of custom versus TP. If there is an MNC business, they need to first address how they are going to undertake that business. And the answer to this question lies in transfer pricing, which many of the taxpayers don't relate to because possibly they are early stage, not guided well. Everything that you do in a multinational scenario needs to be under the four corners of transfer pricing. That's the way how TP and customs would converge, and the day will come that they will converge ideologically also.
Very well answered.
Thank you, Deep. Any other comments? We can be very slow in this also. If you are interested, I can take session 2 after 15 days and then we can go to appeals. So no worries. I mean, I don't want to rush into it. Sagarji, is that okay,
Sagarji,
right?
I feel, yes, I think that I second his views.
Sure.
Sagarji
Yes.
is online.
Yes. You can. I also agree with that. So time is not a constraint. So you can go as per your own speed because there are so many people who are interested in this topic but not conversant with the topic. So you can take your time, and each time that their difficulties or questions or discussions are over, you can hold on for next time. But I think now for this particular aspect, we have covered everything. So you can move on to next area of discussion.
Sure. Thank you, Sagarji. So let's look at a typical compliance chart from a TP and various tax perspectives. So a year starts on say 1st of April, ends on 31st of March. Generally, not the COVID scenarios, but the book should end on 30th of September. Ideally, November is the date this year where you need to finalize the tax audits as well as transfer pricing audits, including the Form 3CEB. And the same date is also there for the tax return filings, including the master file, because master file in Form 3CEAA, which is extension of transfer pricing regulation and transfer pricing documentation itself, needs to be filed. Okay, it's just not to be maintained. It needs to be filed on the portal, and if country by country reporting is applicable, then that also needs to be filed within 1 year from the end of the financial year of the parent company, if it's an Indian company, which is on 31st March 2022. Okay. So this is a typical time chart from a compliance point of view. Now, whenever I talk of transfer pricing, this is something that I always had in mind, because transfer pricing for me is a triangular concept, because for any multinational company, it starts with designing the transfer pricing model or the transfer pricing structure. So I call it the 3Ds. The first D out of that is the design pillar, which acts the blueprint of the entire global, I could say, how to do business globally. That is what this particular design phase covers for a multinational. So this includes your price setting mechanism, this includes your transfer pricing policies. And let me tell you, if you are able to successfully draft, draw, and picture in a transfer pricing policy as well as price setting mechanism, 50% of your litigation worry goes out. This is extremely important. Most of the Indian taxpayers don't understand it. They feel transfer pricing is only 3CB and I'm going to hire a chartered accountant who will sign on the Form 3CB just like a tax audit. And this happens after I end my year, and somebody will do the needful with whatever transactions I undertake. And it is his headache to ultimately manage my transfer prices. That's not the fact. That's not what transfer pricing actually is. Transfer pricing, as I said, is the way to do business globally by a multinational company. So many a times, if you look at the first questionnaire that is issued by the transfer pricing officer, the question there is kindly explain the price setting mechanism of the transactions that you have undertaken. That's one question. The second is kindly submit the global transfer pricing policies which are maintained by the SEC. These are the two questions. Okay. Now, most of the taxpayers address them as follows. On the price setting mechanism, they say the price setting mechanism is an arm's length price setting mechanism. A simple one-liner answer, okay? Which is as the TPO sees that answer, he gets frustrated. He said, okay, generally you need to do an arm's length pricing, but you explain, how our entire TP has been lined up. That's what he's interested to know, but that is something that taxpayers don't do. Second, whether global transfer pricing policies have been developed and maintained, the taxpayer is or the client is not aware, or the SEC is not aware if there are any global transfer pricing policies maintained at the group level. So this is generally the answer that is given to the questionnaire circulated by the TPO. Now, till today, you could still go to the TPO and explain him that, okay, we are not submitted it, but this is the way how it is done. Going forward, when we are going in e-assessment from a TP point of view, this is not going to be possible. Everything needs to be written, and if you are going to give answers like these, then I think God should help, because I have generally seen that if you are able to explain the price setting mechanism very well, your chances go up by 50% to successfully come out of the tax representation at the TP level. Okay, and of course, the second D is something that we need to cover around. It is the entire documentation, which is the Rule 10D documentation. Read with section 92D. That's the initial section that we should start with, and any type of transfer pricing submissions need to be backed with the justifications that are there in the transfer pricing documentation. And the third D is defense, which I said could be either a proactive defense or a reactive or responsive defense under either APAs or vis-a-vis the representations. So I can sum up transfer pricing in these three Ds entirely. Can we all mute for some time, unless there are any comments at this stage? I'm so sorry.
Gaurav, can I say, Akshay, can I say it in a lighter vein?
Yes, Prasadji.
Yeah, after design, document, defense, we probably have something called destiny.
But if you do all these three things right, then your destiny is in your hand. Isn't it? Hello?
No, that is right. But sometimes the officers are such, they are just determined not to accept.
Yeah, that's their job.
Yeah, that's their job. But that's what sometimes they behave also.
Yeah.
And there is no accountability on them.
Yeah, but I think with e-assessments, I'm not too sure how they will pan out in the transfer pricing forte. As much as I get tensed, on the other side, I think for say taxpayers who are able to articulate everything very well on a piece of paper, I think for them e-assessments would be a boon, because for anybody to take a controversial position with all the documentation that is already submitted, and a person who doesn't know you, becomes a little bit difficult in the e-assessment level. So myself nervous how it will pan out in terms of transfer pricing, but that is something that the time will tell whether the aggressiveness quotient will go down or go up.
Akshay, I think you can go to the participant and mute those who are actually making noise and actually not speaking, but background noise is there. Just try doing that so that your
Yeah,
speech will be.
Sure.
Yeah. So Akshay, I have a point to ask here with respect to the master file.
Yes. Just
Yeah.
a second, just a second. There is some background noise. I'm just trying to figure out.
You can mute everyone, and those who want to speak, they will unmute themselves.
Okay.
Suraj Doshi, just check.
I think it's all okay now. Yes, somebody wanted to
Yeah. Akshay.
contribute.
Yeah. So
Yes.
actually, my point is with respect to the, as you said, that there has to be documentation which talks about CBCR master file and the local file, which is basically 92D documentation. Now I have a query. Suppose my parent company, there's a parent company which is there in France, and it has a wholly owned subsidiary which is based out in India. Right.
Sure.
And both of them are in the business of services. They are not into manufacturing. The Indian subsidiaries is providing the services to the head office, and the Indian company is also taking some services from the head office. Now, as uh, as per the TP rules, the head office needs to do a master file compliances, and they are doing the master file and preparing the master file at the parent level, that is in France, wherein they're describing 5 services and the TP method for each of the services. And when the Indian company, suppose the French company is providing the services and showing the net margin method, right? And when the Indian company is showing the same as a purchase of services in the TP report, whether the Indian company can show the TP method as cost plus method or any other method which can differentiate from the method which is there in the master file of the parent entity. Will that be a non-compliance as far as the TP rules are concerned?
So if I just try to summarize your question, you are saying that in the master file, there is a particular method at a global level that a French company has selected, whether the
Right.
Indian company could select another method for testing, correct?
Right.
So
I
you
mean to say
can,
that, yeah, I mean to say the services which the French company is providing as a seller service, they are showing net margin method, and the services which I am showing as a whaling manual service, I am showing it as cross plus method. So that is my
correct.
question.
So as an Indian taxpayer, uh, the taxpayer is allowed to select the most appropriate method. So that
Right.
is up to the taxpayer to select the method which he thinks is the most appropriate given the circumstances. It will not, so the method would not be impacted by the method that is followed by my parent company or any of the group company. It needs to be, as I said, the most appropriate method, which means for that circumstances, whatever the taxpayer feels, that method can be adopted. It's also not important that the method needs to be consistent year on year. However, if there are any changes in the method, that needs to be justified and documented with the reasons why particular method was followed last year and why there is a change in method this year.
Okay, so I go back to what I said. If that would have been the case, that I can differentiate for the matter which has been mentioned in the master file, then I will go back to the same scenario which was there before this web section plan 13 is concerned, that everybody is following the different method. Then what is the objective or what is the purpose of having a master file in
So
place?
master file is not only for methods. Master
Mm-hmm.
file has so many other elements.
Mm-hmm.
It includes 5 major elements, which includes, I would say, the details on the IPs. It
Okay.
includes details on the financial arrangements. It
Right.
includes details on global function asset and risk analysis. It includes details on the global supply chain. It includes details on global financial positions taken, any APAs that are being signed. So there are so
Right.
many other details which earlier to BEPS Action Plan 13, Indian authorities or any other authorities for India perspective, so it could be any global authorities, they never had that amount of clarity in terms of the global operations of that particular company. And it was left to the company's whims and fancies what it wants to disclose. But now that's not the case. There is a set format in which the group company needs to maintain the documentation, and even India will mirror that documentation if the transactions overall at the group level, the revenue is above 500 crores and the transactions are more than 50 crores in India, and if it is intangible transactions, more than 10 crores. So
Right.
method is a very small part of a bigger transfer pricing study and a fiasco that could happen, because method rejection and acceptance, I would say those litigations have almost become litigations of past. So that those cases have now reduced a lot, where you say you want to go under cup and the TPO said, no, TNMM is the best method to apply. You can use 2 methods or 3 methods to justify a particular transactions. It's important what is the method used to fix the transaction. So there is a TP fixation method, there is a TP testing method. Nobody speaks of fixation methods. The fixation method is something that you will find in master file, and that does not have any relevance to the testing methods. Testing could be done as per any methodologies.
Okay, I have one more point to ask. Sorry, I'm taking so much of your time. Right. So, suppose as per the TP rules, the TP documentation has to be maintained before the filing of the income tax return or before the filing of the TP report. But in most of the cases, as you are aware that everything happened after the filing of TP report, I mean to say the 92 documentation at TP studies, most of the cases happens after that, right? Which is a fact, a ground reality. Now, suppose I'm taking a hypothetical case, right? I have prepared a TP form 3CB, right? And I have mentioned 3-4 type of transaction in the form 3CB on the sales side as well as on the purchase side, right? And in one of the transaction I have mentioned net margin method, right? Now, after at the time of preparation of the TP study, which happened 4 months down the line after the filing of the ITR, client asked that instead of net margin method, can you use the cost plus method as a corroborative method? So can you give your views on it, that if somebody wants to change the method from the which is mentioned in the TP report vis-a-vis which has been mentioned in the TP study?
Okay, so let me take the example other way around, because without finalization of transfer pricing documentation, finalizing form 3CB, that's not how it needs to be done. Documentation needs to be finalized first, and then the form 3CB. Of course, if you want to document certain things and finalize it, it might take some time, but you should have documentation to your control to make a decision on the methodologies that needs to be factored in the form 3CB. And this is something that I was going to cover in the compliance section as it is, but good that you brought this particular point up. So let me take a reverse case where in the documentation you have mentioned TNMM, but then at the time of 3CB, the client is stating that he wants to change it to a cost plus method. Now in such a case, the responsibility of finalizing the method is on the taxpayer, not on the auditor. And the documentation that is maintained, the documentation responsibility is also with the taxpayer. It is not auditor's responsibility. It is basically the management responsibility to finalize the document. So if the management feels that, say, its cost plus method is a better method to use on the TNMM, then you would first change it in the documentation and accordingly change it in the form 3CEB as a cost plus method, and not the other way around. However, an auditor also has rights to state the method, and in case of there is any divergence in view, then the auditor should also mention in the notes in the form 3CB that as per him, TNMM is the best method to use, but the taxpayer has used the cost plus method. So although you don't agree 100% to it, you don't still qualify that particular report.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay? But practically, at least at my firm, we always do the documentation first. We ensure that the management has the documentation, and then only the form 3CB is finalized.
Okay.
Hello, I'm Milind Desai here. Can I ask one small question on the same?
Yes, Milindji.
Yeah.
100%.
Suppose any company has 2 different verticals of businesses. and one vertical probably is where you have backup center here in India for an American company, which is a front-ending company. And another vertical of the same company has a business which is based out of the US, let's say, and they typically call US company as a agent for their business, and the billing happens from the US. So they would like to have cost plus methodology for a particular business where they have entire backup team here in India, and wherever US company acts as an agent, they would like to have a commission, commission percentage or something like that. So how does it work with these two verticals then?
So that's absolutely possible, Mehul. Only thing is that at the accounting level, there needs to be a proper, I would say, segmentation done uh, between the two methods, say a cost plus method and a commission method. Also, one needs to bear in mind certain anti-fragmentation rules, that it should not happen that
I think somebody is disturbing.
Please mute everybody. Vidyadhar Somani, please mute yourself. Please mute everyone. Akshay.
Yeah.
Key partner Support Parivar Chaha, Jewelry partner Puna Gatti and Sons, Finance partner Lokmanya Multipurpose RE.
I don't understand why people don't understand. Yeah. Sorry.
No worries. So you have two different verticals. Your accounts. There has to be certain amount of segmentation that needs to be maintained here. However, anti-fragmentation rule needs to be considered, that it should not happen that a service is going from India on a cost plus and ultimately coming back to India, where India is only acting as a sales force. So the operations and sales both are in India, and it's only a round tripping that's happening of the transaction. So that care needs to be taken, and also things around GAR needs to be taken care there. But otherwise, sticking to your questions, I feel segmentation is important. You can follow two different models for two different independent revenue models, and nothing wrong in that. Absolutely nothing wrong in that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Akshay, can we go ahead and take up the question answer if there are any little later?
Sure. Okay. So this is the typical, I would say, the compliance platform for the transfer pricing. You have the form 3CEB, the 3CEAA, the 3CEAB, 3CEAC, D, and E. So that's not F, that's E. Other forms that we have in transfer pricing are the safe harbor application form, the APA form, and the dispute resolution panel objections. Let's come to some practicalities of TP audit. Now, if you see the typical Indian taxpayer, they generally have various audit loops, starting with, say, stat audit, internal audit, tax audits, TP audit, GST audits, and this is the entire ecosystem that the Indian corporate sector and the government puts a lot of trust and responsibility on us, which are chartered accountants, for their smooth functioning of the business and also the entire governance. So I think from a TP point of view also, as far as MNCs are concerned, we CAs are a very strong pillar for the entire ecosystem of TP, at least, where our views are really appreciated whenever we look at even representations, or whenever we are at the appeal stage, or even at the compliance stage. I think we are those key elements who has the power to make a difference. Now, certain basics on TP audits. Now, when I'm saying audits, this is typically Form 3CB. Basically, it is applicable to each and every person who has entered into an international transaction. Now, let me explain you international transaction. International transaction means a transaction which is entered into between two or more associated enterprises. So first, you need to be A's or in normal terms, RPT, related parties, only after that it is tagged as an international transaction. Or if there are two companies which are entering into specified domestic transactions, there are certain transactions which are specifically noted to fall under the transfer pricing purview. The threshold for TP audit, as we discussed, is none, but however, from a specified domestic transaction point of view, the threshold is 20 crores. The form filing is undertaken by the company. However, there is a compulsory audit to be undertaken by a chartered accountant, and the form 3CEB is actually a certificate of transfer pricing audit, which is the final report that comes in, and it's electronically filed along with, say, the due date of whenever there is tax audits, and it coincides with tax audits most of the time. Now let's look at the scope of the audit, and this is extremely important for us to understand in terms of reducing any potential litigations and avoiding any difference in opinions between, say, the chartered accountants as well as the taxpayers. So the entire scope is divided into three parts. The first part talks of the examination responsibility, where the responsibility of the chartered accountant is to look at the accounts and the various documentation that is maintained by the taxpayer, but only in relation to international transactions. So it is not expecting an auditor to look at all the transactions that the taxpayer has undertaken, but then examination should be done only to the extent of the international transaction that has been entered into with the associated enterprises. Second, the responsibility and the scope is to forming an opinion on the documentation, which is the transfer pricing study report and the allied documentation, including master files, which has been maintained by the taxpayer. So to express his opinion on that, and post the opinion, there are also transactional aspects of it, where a tax auditor or a TP auditor is expected to comment on the correctness of the transaction which is entered into, including the methods, qualitative as well as quantitative details. Now, I have tried to explain the various scope here as far as the examination is concerned. I'll be a little bit fast here because you guys will already know how to undertake an examination and all those things. So I'll be very quick here. Very important that a tax auditor or a TP auditor applies his professional judgment. So he is not expected to undertake 100% review of the international transaction. Some amount of materiality could be followed and some principles should be followed. Many a times the statutory auditor is the transfer pricing auditor, but whenever the TP auditor is different than the statutory auditor, then of course the TP auditor is expected to rely on the work undertaken by the statutory auditor. He is not expected to challenge every comma and full stop of statutory auditor. Neither is he expected to undertake the statutory audit once again. Right? For any difference in figures between the statutory auditor and the transfer pricing auditor, it's very important to have a reconciliation which is made on the file, because generally a stat audit is done earlier and then a transfer pricing audit, and there could be possibilities that there could be certain amounts which from a TP point of view could be different, or certain points which could have been missed out. Now, under the responsibility of TP auditor, a TP auditor is required to explain and maintain those files and notes separately. And if at all it's a significant difference, then that also needs to be pointed out in the notes to the Form 3CEB. Very important to take the representation from the management. And there is something called as deemed international transaction. Okay. Of course, you can look at section 92B2. Sorry. Is there any view that needs to be exchanged? Hello?
Yeah. Can I come in? I have actually written in the chat box.
Sure.
Yeah, but I just wanted to ask, especially when the international transactions are taking place, and we don't have much database of the other similar such transactions happening worldwide or in that particular region. then how we will be able to have a confidence that our documentation is appropriate or it is
Okay. So,
undisputable. That's my question.
so Prasadji, frankly, in the business world, uh, there is nothing that is not that could not be compared. So, if you are saying there is a transaction where the products are uncomparable, I'm sure there will be certain functions that are comparable. So there are various methods that could be used, and now with the flexibility of any other method being there, I think we have widened the base of comparison. So I'm very confident that any transaction that is undertaken, even if it is hard to value intangible, the OECD has clearly justified how to value the hard to value intangibles and what are the comparable methods to bring in when we are looking at hard to value intangibles or transactions. So I think from a TP point of view, until unless we have any factual situation, more than happy to address and look at it separately. Uh, but everything does have a comparability attached to it.
Thank you.
Shiji, can I ask a question?
Yes, Pramod.
A small thing that suppose in financial year 1920, I have done an export of service to an associated party. Okay, and in financial year 2021, there is no transaction, but there is only a revaluation of this particular outstanding. Whether this type of a revaluation is required to be reported in Form 3CEB?
Okay, so the revaluation would not be disclosed, but the fact is the outstanding is really outstanding for more than a year. The question is why it is not received within the credit period, right? So it gives rise to a separate transaction of deemed interest imputation on the outstanding amount if it is not received within the time. So revaluations or any type of monetary revaluations don't need to be looked into, but the fact that on a debtor there is a revaluation happening and it may possibly outstanding for more than certain normal credit period, then the question on the interest element needs to be looked into. But staying to your question, revaluations don't need to be disclosed as a transaction. Does that answer?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Only in this particular case, if somebody has gone to RBI and taken an extension for this particular outstanding, in spite of that, this particular imputation of the interest will come?
Yes, yes. The reason is because TP is a separate law, especially whenever the sale was undertaken, it was undertaken with a thought and an interest which is already included for the outstanding credit period. So it would have factored in, say, 3 months of interest, and accordingly, a sales had been identified. When I'm trying to compare that sales with a third party, that third party will also have similar credit period. But the fact is, if there is more than 1 year and that is granted as a permission from an RBI, from a TP point of view, my sales does not reflect the true interest that is embedded in it, where the Indian company is financing the foreign company indirectly. And that's why still the risk of an artificial interest imputation will stay from a TP point of view despite of RBI approval.
Thank you.
Okay, now here I'll go a little bit slow. There is a concept of deemed international transaction, which is a very Indian concept. It is not, you don't find this concept anywhere in the OECD. You don't find this concept in any of the developed transfer pricing regulations. So when talking to some of the transfer pricing policy maker, they said, oh my God, what is this? So deemed international transaction means that you don't need an associated enterprise to enter into a transaction for being at arm's length. So it's typically the triangulation aspects where an associated enterprise hires a third party and directs the third party to supply goods to the Indian party. Okay. And the price and other terms and conditions are controlled by my associated enterprise. But if you see from books of account, I'm purchasing it from third parties. This particular transaction will not find a mention in related party transaction schedule. it will not find mention in any of the GST aspects of associated enterprise or related parties. Only in transfer pricing it says that if you are purchasing or selling to a third party, where the purchase and sale to the third party is impacted or the terms and conditions are controlled by my associated enterprise, then the transaction between the Indian enterprise and a third party will be considered as a deemed international transaction, right? There are various cases around it. And from an auditor's point of view, this is extremely challenging position to be in, because a taxpayer will not disclose deemed international transactions so easily to you, because from his perspective, these are third party transactions. How to find it? If you think you are purchasing and selling to one party continuously, then it's important to understand why you are selling to that particular party itself. Otherwise, if you're a subsidiary of a foreign company and you are not doing so much of associated enterprises or related party transactions, and you're purchasing it from third parties, these are certain indicators of you questioning the taxpayers and your clients to dig out if there is a possibility of deemed international transactions being created. All the preferred consumers or suppliers, like there is a big company and they have tied up with Dell to provide them laptops. Even cases like these could be covered under deemed international transactions. Okay, this is something that we need to be careful about.
Yeah, Akshay, as you said that in case there is a lot many transaction happening between the Indian subsidiary and the unrelated party, right? But that could be a genuine case because my head office will provide me the services at a higher cost. So I'm subcontracting some certain services within India, which I'm getting at a lower cost, which is a normal business decision, which should not be entered into a deemed international transaction.
Yeah, so if it is your decision, which is Indian company's decision, no harm in it. But if the decision is of the foreign company to control the act of the independent party along with the Indian party, then in such a case, it could give rise to the deemed international transaction. And the secret to this, whether it is there as deemed international transaction or not, is all in the documentation.
Right.
If the
And that is something which we can see from the agreement. In that case, there should be a tripartite agreement wherein the foreign company is also mentioned. Then that is a clear case of deemed international transaction, wherein there is a tripartite agreement when the transaction is happening between the unrelated Indian entity and group company of India. Also, there is a third company which is the head office, which is mentioned in that particular agreement. That could result into a deemed international transaction. This is my understanding.
So not always. So tripartite becomes a very easy case to solve. But recently we were in discussion with one of our clients. I'll share a practical example here. The client was a 50 crore client and the international transactions were only 30 lakhs. So we said, only 30 lakhs, you are a German company in India. What are you doing? He said, we do manufacturing. I said, you do manufacturing on your own account? They said, yes, we do manufacturing on our own account. We are fully capacity utilized and we supply certain parts to all the open markets in India. So we are basically suppliers of certain parts for on and behalf of our foreign company in India, but we are not taking any help of theirs to really function in this particular market. So I said, okay, in that case, the German company is only getting benefits of the dividend. But ideally, that should not be a case. They could have. So what we did is we asked certain more questions, and then we came to know that certain purchases that they're making, they were making certain purchases from companies which were affiliated with Germany, and the purchase price of the Indian company was determined by German nod. So every purchase order that was given by the Indian company to that independent party was actually approved by the German company. And only after that, the Indian company could get that particular purchase. Now, in such a case, with a 30 lakh of an associated enterprise transaction and with very wafer thin margins, somewhere I understood that there would be a deemed international transaction in this. And that's how that deemed international transaction was caught. And that's how it was reported and they were discussed and most of the TP policies were changed. So you need a certain type of knack in terms of finding certain transactions like these, because these are very hard to find transactions and these are very well wrapped around. And a TP auditor, ideally, it becomes very difficult to find. So tripartite agreement is very, very easy to find those transactions. So no issues there.
So at the time of the assessment by the TP of transfer pricing officer, will they generally easily get this kind of a transaction which has not been reported into TP audit, but it has come to his notice at the time of assessment? Will that happening on a very frequent basis, or rarely it is happening?
No,
this is your experience.
It happens in, I would not say frequent basis, but whenever there are deemed international transactions, the TP authorities are very smart enough to find them out of the agreements. So they ask you a question and the onus to prove is, and the burden to prove is on the taxpayer to state that whether there is a transaction, a deemed international transaction or not.
Okay.
So I have seen many adjustment in this on this side. So the second scope, coming back,
actually, can I sorry to interrupt? Can I ask question on this? Suppose there is a company in the US which is manufacturing certain parts, and for the last leg of that process, entire process, it goes to another company which is not a related company, a third-party company, and from that company the part is coming to India. Right. Now here it is not that that third company is buying the part and selling it to India, but third entity is doing some small work or whatever. Now at the same time, American company says that the pricing to Indian company will be guided by us, though you are going to do certain portion of work for us.
Right.
Will it come under this
yes, it is deemed international transactions.
Because it is not directly buying and selling. It is the third entity is doing some work. It 100%. Is doing some value addition.
100%. This will be under deemed international transaction. The reason is because India is purchasing from the third party, and the terms and conditions, the pricing, the methodology is ultimately finalized by the foreign company or the US company in your case.
So okay. So even if it is not just buy and sell, still it will come under the
100%. 100%. Any transactions could be deemed international transaction, not necessarily buy and sell.
Okay. And another question related to this, let's say any auditor misses out this particular, identifying such transactions.
Right.
What is the risk that an auditor is carrying then?
Similar risk to misreporting in the tax audits. But surely let's cover it up by management representations, stating that the management ultimately has the responsibility to bring out whether they have deemed international transactions or not. Or if they have hidden it, then it is not the auditor's responsibility to act as an investigator. But of course, auditor has responsibilities to undertake certain basic audit procedures, which are very true in internal audit as well as stat audit or even tax audit. So the responsibility is it's akin to what a tax audit responsibility is. So if it's well covered up, it might just go unnoticed. But it's important to take a management representation letter, and very important to highlight all the transactions in the management representation letter from a TP perspective.
Okay, that's interesting. But I'm going back to my first question again. When a company is giving, let's say, 90% finished part to another company to complete the part. Yes. Now, obviously, because of the volume discounts, etc., they may have some pricing mechanism between the two entities.
Yes.
Now, when that third entity is selling that part to Indian company, now how will you compare it with? I mean, what sort of TP mechanism valuation you will consider? Because if it is a comparative analysis, or if it is on a comparative analysis basis, if it is matching the international pricing, then what happens?
So I will consider the same TP comparison method that I consider with my associated enterprise. So there is no difference there. So it's going to be similar to what I undertake in the normal associated enterprise scenario. So it's not going to be different. So it's the same TNMM, same profit-based methods, doing the FAR, selecting which of the methods it's applicable. So I'll do the same exercise even in deemed international transactions.
Okay. So basically what you're suggesting is this is applicable when you are importing something from, outside countries, but when you are exporting, this issue may not come in terms of deemed TP.
No, it could also be import, exports, any transactions. Any transactions could result into deemed international transaction.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, Akhi, I have one point to ask. Like Milind sir said that in case the taxpayer has not disclosed the deemed international transaction, and so the TP auditor did. But however, at time of assessment, it has been came to the notice of the TPO that there is some deemed international transaction. Now, what are the various penalties which can be levied by the TPO on the taxpayer? Can you give a glimpse of it?
Yeah, so penalties I was as it is supposed to cover, but there are penalties on misreporting and underreporting. So any type of genuine transfer pricing misouts are ideally not covered under misreporting. That is a specific exclusion if the transfer pricing documentation is maintained. However, if the TP documentation is not maintained around it, then it might go to around even 200%. So either it is 50% or 200%. But if you look at TP point of view, it generally goes at 200%. That's the penalty for hiding any stuff, especially even deemed international transaction, because you will not be maintaining any documentation if you have hidden it already.
Okay. Fair.
Okay, so the second scope is around the opinion, and it's very important that an opinion on the computation of arm's length price is given in the Form 3CEB, and an opinion on maintenance of transfer pricing documentation is given in the Form 3CEB. Now, to address this point, if you look at the third point, if appropriate documentation as per Rule 10D is not maintained, it's important that the tax auditor or the TP auditor qualifies that audit. So it's never possible that you do the transfer pricing audit first and then the documentation. The documentation needs to precede the transfer pricing audit. This is how a transfer pricing process is undertaken. Even if it is practically undertaken at the other way around, I would urge all the professionals to first maybe request the clients to maintain TP documentation, then only undertake the audit. Yeah. Transactions below 1 crore, 10D format is not necessary and compulsory, but taxpayers should still substantiate ALP, and 20 crores is for the SDT transaction. Now, coming to the examination phase, transfer pricing is all about true and correct and not true and fair. So the numbers that are getting reported, it's very important that those numbers are correct numbers. Now, yesterday there has been a case, I forgot the name, but it is by Mumbai ITAT, where the taxpayer on the revenue side, okay, instead of a 15.5 crore, now I remember the numbers very clearly, not the name. Typical accountant. So instead of 15.5 crores in sales, the taxpayer in the Form 3CEB disclosed only 10.5 crores. Okay. And there was an adjustment made, and the TPO said that because you have incorrectly reported in the Form 3CEB, I'm going to make a TP adjustment of complete 15.5 crores because you have hidden the facts. But ideally, it was proven at the tribunal level that that was a typo. It was a mistake, which was an inadvertent error, and the case ultimately came in favor of the taxpayer, stating that any inadvertent errors in 3CEB would not ultimately result into taxes for the client, if taxes for the taxpayer, if taxes have already been paid on the 15.5 crores. However, there is the other side to it. I'm not saying that the client or the taxpayer did this, but at that point of time, there was a circular which stated that any type of any international transactions above 15 crore would be tested for transfer pricing and would be referred to transfer pricing officer. Now, I don't know if the taxpayer was smart enough and they would have said, okay, we don't want to disclose 15 crores, we want to disclose below 15 crores. And that's why that 10 crore was disclosed instead of 15 crores. So there could be all types of scenarios. But the fact is, whenever an auditor is looking into it, it is auditor's responsibility to say it's not 15 crores, it is 10 crores. It's somewhere impossible that in tax, on while paying tax, it was 15 crores, but while reporting it is 10 crores, right? So the auditor needs to apply his professional judgment, because he did not examine at that point of time. The taxpayer had to suffer almost 8-9 years of litigation on a simple matter of typo or an inadvertent error from the accountant's perspective. So we carry a lot of responsibility to disclose the figures true and correct. Otherwise, we are inviting a lot of litigation around. This is a typical format of Form 3CB. There are two parts to it. One is the report and then the annexure. And in annexure, there are three parts, part A, B, and C. Clause 1 to 9 are fairly general, which coincide and which are almost similar to the income tax law. But part B, which is clause 10 to 20, talks about international transactions, and part 21 to 25 talks about specified domestic transactions. Okay, Sagarji, now it's already 10:55. Do you want me to go ahead and cover international transactions, or do you want to take a halt, or maybe we can resume this next Thursday?
If substantial matter is left, then we'll have to continue on the next Thursday or next to next Thursday. But if it is, let us say, to be covered within, let's say, 10 minutes or something, then we will take it up. So
Okay.
it's up to you.
So there are 40 slides. There is a master file also, which is included. So 10 minutes it's impossible.
Okay, so that's great actually. So I would suggest that we can have, in fact, actually we meet every 15 days. But in order to complete this, we may meet next Thursday to close this, or maybe, explain this. And then again, we can resume on immediately next Thursday for the case studies or maybe appeal related matters.
Sure.
So if you are okay, then we can close for the day.
I am okay. If everybody's wants to bear me for one more evening, then I'm very happy.
No, sir, we are actually ready to bear with you, or rather we are ready to spend several evenings with you. But for today, because many of the people actually go to bed little early, and it is only because of me that they actually attend a meeting at 9:30 in the night.
Right.
So just before we close, I would request one of us to summarize or close this. If CA Deepak Tikekar is there, I would.
Yeah.
So we are stopping on slide 18. Huh?
Okay. So next time what you can do is that, quickly we can go from 1 to 17 slide in 5 minutes or 10 minutes time, and then we can go to 18 slide.
Correct. But I hope I have kept it simple enough and also relevant enough in terms of appeals and litigation.
Absolutely, sir.
Sure.
Akshay, so it was very nice, but let Deepak summarize or say so.
Yes.
Akshay, it was a very
AJ, are you likely to share the slides?
Yes, I'll be sharing the slides.
Yeah, so Akshay, it will be really helpful if you can brief the agenda for the next meeting so that we can come prepare with a list of questions at our end.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yes, Deepak sir, you can go ahead.
Akshay, it was a very, very interesting presentation. I thoroughly enjoyed it. You covered basically that the history of the transfer pricing for last 20 years. It is very heartening to note that India is leader and the many foreign countries are following India. Then you covered your tax litigation journey, very interesting. And the points which came out, what was the relief given in appeal, all of that was very interesting. The 3D concept was excellent. I liked it very much. The design document and the defense. In one liner, you mentioned that TP is way to manage your international business. Excellent. And in the end, the deemed international transaction presentation was also very good. Overall, I enjoyed it thoroughly. Keep it up.
Thank you, Deepak.
And we look forward not only one or two, many more your presentations.
Hello.
Thank you. Yes,
Hello.
Yes, Bhupender ji.
Akshay.
Yes.
A very good evening to you.
Good evening.
In the start of the lecture, you had mentioned that it would be a great task to see whether at 9:30 people would be really there or not to be very honestly, we were last were 30 participants to hear you out. So you have gelled us very good. Keep it up. You have gelled us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Akshay, for spending your time.
Thank you,
I will
Sagarji,
just
for
add
inviting
one
me.
thing, Akshay ji, ki
Yes,
you
Pramod.
really kept all of us awake.
Transfer pricing always keeps me awake. Next week, there are so many DRPs now.
But
So
you definitely passed on that mantle to us. That's what it is. Thank you very much.
You
Thank you,
answered
thank you, sir.
questions also straight away. Very good. Very good.
Yeah.
Thank you, Deepakji.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Have a good night, and we'll meet next week, Sagarji, if that is convenient.
Yeah, and expect this to be uploaded on YouTube by this Sunday.
I will just stop recording.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah,
just
please.
a second, because I don't know. Stop recording.